A dangerous fantasy. The idea that there's going to be a European Air Force, a European army, it is simply not true. The problem with people like Nigel Farage is they swing at windmills. They see conspiracies everywhere. I wouldn't be surprised if Nigel Farage soon tells us that the moon landing was a fake, that Barack Obama isn't American, that Elvis isn't dead. You know, it is not going to happen.
But are we going to have a choice on this?
No, I think it's no is the answer.
So are you saying that if 27 countries push ahead and form a European army, that you as Prime Minister will keep us out of it?
Yeah, there's not going to be a European army. But look, let me explain.
But there is going to be a European
No, there isn't. Let me explain.
Hang on, Ed. Last year, I was on with Nick Clegg. He said my talk of a European army was a dangerous fantasy. We now have the bosses of the European Union, including the French President, saying they want to build a European army. You can shake your head all you like, but actually this is happening. And if it did come to a European army, would that be enough for you to give people a referendum?
I'm not going to have a European army, but let me explain. I think
so whether that's a yes or a no. Are we seeing the first steps towards a European army?
No, the European army is entirely hypothetical.
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting to see that there's a worry there could be a separate EU army in some way.
If things go Jean-Claude Juncker's way, this will be the future of European defence. In an interview, the president of the EU Commission called for a European army. It's not a new idea, and it has many supporters in Germany, even in the defence ministry.
That's the reality. So, second thing, defence union, finally take the decision and start first of all the proposals from the Commission and then further on.
Quand je regarde le monde où nous vivons, l'Europe est de plus en plus fracturée. Quand je regarde le monde où nous vivons, vous avez des puissances autoritaires qui réémergent et qui se réarment aux confins de l'Europe. Nous sommes bousculés par les tentatives d'intrusion dans le cyberespace et l'intervention d'ailleurs dans notre vie démocratique de plusieurs. Nous devons nous protéger à l'égard de la Chine, de la Russie et même des États-Unis d'Amérique. Quand je vois le président Trump annoncer il y a quelques semaines le fait qu'il sorte d'un grand traité de désarmement qui avait été pris, je le rappelle, après la crise des euromissiles au milieu des années 80, qui avait frappé l'Europe. Qui en est la victime principale? L'Europe et sa sécurité. On ne protégera pas les Européens si on ne décide pas d'avoir une vraie armée européenne.
This is a dangerous fantasy. The idea that there's going to be a European Air Force, a European army, it is simply not true.
There's not going to be a European army.
The European army is entirely hypothetical.
So why am I showing you guys that video again? Well, it's because a lot of people seem not to understand Brexit, especially Romanians. And if you think about it, it kind of makes sense that they don't understand it. Because on one hand, you see that the British people voted to leave. But on the other hand, they're politicians, and our Prime Minister constantly talks about wanting to stay. So why can't they make up their mind? Why are they so stubborn? So I'm hoping that in this video I will manage to explain to people the actual reason behind Brexit. Because it's very important to understand the actual argument and not strawman it, especially if you're a Remainer. Because if you want to change someone's mind, you have to actually understand their argument so you can tackle it if you want to accomplish that. So in the case of Brexit, if you read the mainstream media, you will notice that the reason British people want to live is because they are being racists, they are xenophobic, they're Islamophobic, they are homophobic, and they want to leave the European Union. Now, this argument really does not make any sense, because if you look at some of the laws that Britain is having, they are some of the most protective laws towards minorities than almost anywhere else within the European Union. In fact, you could argue that Britain's culture is so PC that it's starting to affect the way their judicial system works. If you look at the curriculum that British kids go through schools, through Common Core, you'll notice that the way kids learn their LGBTs is so progressive that the European Union would have to learn something from Britain than the other way around, because the European Union has a lot more room to grow within this regard. So the idea that Britain is being racist or xenophobic is further from the truth. Especially when compared to the European Union, when Eastern nations are far more conservative than what the United Kingdom is. So what is the real reason there? Well, the real reason is that of sovereignty. You see, sovereignty is the idea that a country gets to decide its own future, that British people should be in charge of making their own laws within Britain. If you don't have sovereignty, then you're a vassal state. It means someone else controls you. It's pretty much the same idea of having a house. It wouldn't be really your house if someone else would dictate what type of furniture you're allowed to buy, where you're allowed to place it, what type of food you're allowed to eat, at what hour, if they would install microphones in your homes in order to hear what you have to speak, and if they would control the front entrance, deciding who gets to come into your house and who doesn't. So this is really what Brexit is about. Now, the question is, why don't the British people trust the European Union? Well, first of all, the European Union is not democratic, and they're not making any sort of attempts to hide the fact. This is well known. But other than that, if you look at the European Union army and how it has been proposed to the people, you'll notice that this is the rule based on how they make legislations and not the actual exception. So, first of all, they had the conversation behind closed doors. It wasn't an open public debate that would be bottom up, that the people of the European Union got together and they decided that they need an army, and then they, voiced that opinion towards their representatives who voiced it towards the European Union. No, it's the other way around. The European Union is having the conversation and then is forcing people from the bottom to comply. And the way the conversation is done is again behind closed doors. Now, when you have a person that wants to blow the whistle and actually talk with the people, they are being labeled a conspiracy theorist. Now, if you look at the word conspiracy theorist in our day and age, it's usually a dog whistle for censorship. It's usually a dog whistle for suppression or to make sure that the person is considered to be crazy and you should not listen to them. A lot of social media accounts have decided to suppress videos that are considered conspiracy theories. And you see a lot of MPs, both from the European Union and from the United Kingdom and other nations, also encouraging other social medias to also suppress videos that are labeled conspiracy theories. So obviously they do not want the public to have the conversation at all because they know that it's an unpopular conversation. If you think about the European Union army, which is a very important topic that everyone should be involved in, you have different questions that start to arise. First of all, why would I want to pay more taxes for a different army? We're already within NATO. Second of all, where is the army going to be deployed? Are they going to deploy it in the Middle East and step on the toes of Russia and the United States? Are they going to deploy it in Russia? Are they going to deploy it against another European state? None of these questions are answered, and these are very important topics to ask. Thirdly, the European Union was actually created to keep Germany in check. And now we want the European Union to have an army when Germany has a lot of influence. You can see why a lot of people really don't think that's a good idea. So the conversation takes place behind closed doors. Anyone that tries to blow the whistle is being suppressed. And when finally they come out, usually a couple of months before the final decision, there is very little you can do as an EU citizen to stop this if you disagree. It's very similar to how Article 11 and Article 13 were discussed behind closed doors, and then with a couple of months before the vote, well, the media started talking a little bit about it. So, in the case of the EU army, if my government would have a proposition that most people find it incredibly unpopular, you could actually gain signatures from other citizens in order to form a petition to start a referendum. And if the referendum is voted that the people are against whatever unpopular decision or unpopular legislation is being passed, then the government has no choice but to take that legislation off the table. In the case of the European Union, there is no such process. There is absolutely nothing you can do in order to stop a legislation from happening. And it's really this level of subterfuge and way of implementing legislation top-down rather than bottom-up that the British people don't like. They would rather be poorer and take economic damage from the European Union and be in charge of their own nations than to be rich and subjugated. And speaking of economy, also British people are the third biggest payers in the European Union, which should lead the question, how will the EU decide what happens after Britain leaves in the case of a hard Brexit. What countries are going to pick up the burden in order to pay for the more poorer states within the European Union? That is something that the mainstream media never covers. If you read the mainstream media, you will see that they constantly talk about what Britain is going to do after they break from the European Union, but they never talk about what the European Union is going to do after they lose their pay piggy. So, this is another topic that is worthy to take into consideration. Now, regarding Brexit, the people of the British public wanted Brexit to happen. And in order to get their sovereignty, really the only way is for a hard Brexit. However, the leaders of Britain seem not to want to have a Brexit. They do not want what the people want. So it's really like having a conversation with your wife and wanting to sell your house, but your wife really doesn't want to sell it. So what you do is you get your wife to try and sell the house for you. Now, if she really doesn't want to sell it, she will either try to find only the worst deals possible so that you change your mind about selling the house, or she will actually just try to delay as long as possible. And this is what's happening in Britain. The politicians are trying to delay Brexit as long as possible. And if you read The Guardian, there was this very disgusting article, which was saying that because the number of people that voted Brexit were usually old people, if a lot of time passes, if we get like 4 or 8 years down the line, then even if no one changed their mind about Brexit, even if everyone still thinks the same way, a lot of old people would have died, and a lot of younger people would manage to get to the age of 18, so that even if nothing changed in society and people still think the same way, because of the changes of demographics, you will now have a pro-remaining population. This is a very disgusting and disturbing way that The Guardian chose to make a point. This is not how democracy used to function in any way, shape, or form. And they keep forgetting that these people who voted Brexit is someone grandma. Like literally, there is a reporter in The Guardian who wants your grandma to die so that their political message gets to be pushed. It's absolutely abhorrent. Now, you can also notice what Jeremy Corbyn said in a speech. He said that because the European Union fears Brexit, they're willing to take it off the table. So you can see that they're not honest in the way they're doing negotiations. Clearly, if you want to negotiate with someone, you will use that thing they fear of to your advantage. For example, if I want to sell something to my neighbor and my neighbor is afraid that I would sell that thing to someone else, I would not go to my neighbor and assure him that I will never sell it to someone else, because then my neighbor is actually going to lower the price. So with that said, there is new information that recently came out that supports my point, that the British elites, the politicians, do not want Brexit to happen. So we got this article which came out yesterday, and it really tells that what I've been saying all along is accurate. Tony Blair has been accused of unacceptable behavior after it emerged he has been briefing Emmanuel Macron, the French president, on how to force Britain to stay in the European Union. The former Labour Prime Minister believes that if the EU stands its ground over the Brexit deal, the Parliament will cave in and accept a customs union, which would keep Britain yoked to Brussels, or a second referendum that could cancel Brexit altogether. So what this means is that while people wanted sovereignty from the European Union, they're going to be actually turned into a vassal state. So the Remainers don't get what they want, and the Brexiteers don't get what they want either. This is the worst possible outcome. It's as if the European Union would have declared war on Britain, they would have won the war, and now Britain is suing for peace, and they're becoming just an annexed state to the European Empire. And no, I'm not being hyperbolic when I say the European Union Empire. I'm just quoting Guy Verhofstadt, which is the man in charge of Brexit on behalf of the European Union. Furthermore, he's also talking about getting African nations within the European Union. I guess it's going to be very difficult to complain about migration when there is going to be no borders between the EU and Africa. But that's a conversation for another time. Let's actually talk about what we have here on the table. He is reported to have told Mr. Macron to hold firm and wait for events to play out in London that end in Britain staying in the European Union. Peter Bone, an Eurosceptic Conservative MP, said it is totally unacceptable for a former prime minister to go around the heads of European countries and undermine the government's position. I'm not sure we could find another time in modern history where this has happened. So in order to understand just how ridiculous this is, I want to bring you an analogy. Imagine that there is a corporation by the name of V's Bad Hair Industries. And V's Bad Hair Industries has been a long-time partner with Sticks and Hammer, we like to spoon you.com. Now, for whatever reason, the partnership doesn't go in favor of V's Bad Hair Industries, and the board of this corporation wants to terminate the agreement. Now, one of the CEOs from V's Bad Hair Industries actually goes to Sticks and Hammer's we like to spoon you.com and is informing their board and their advisors on how to get the best deal with V's Bad Hair Industries. In fact, it's not only how to get a best deal, but how to make sure that the trade partnership doesn't get broken and they end up in a better position than before. What would happen with that CEO, I wonder? Is it moral what that CEO is doing? Would it even be considered legal? So yeah, I do understand why Peter Bone, the Conservative MP, is absolutely baffled by Tony Blair's activities. It seems that his loyalties remain with the European Union rather than that of his own government. Tony Blair has to realize he has had his time as Prime Minister, and I'm surprised and disappointed he has done this. I doubt he would have liked it if his predecessor had done this to him. Thankfully, I don't think it will have any effect other than to damage his legacy. Mr. Blair is an outspoken advocate of a second referendum and has admitted in the past that he has told European leaders it was now probable a second referendum would happen. He has previously met with the European Commissioner President Jean-Claude Juncker for private talks about negotiating with Britain over Brexit. In a recent interview, Mr. Blair told Euronews, "I don't disclose the people I speak to because that should remain private between me and the leaders I talk to. But I think it's very obvious I need to get the European leaders to the next stage, which is to realize that the probability is it's going to happen and they've got to prepare for it." The Sunday Times quoted a conservative source saying that Mr. Blair's dealing with Mr. Macron. He's saying, "You've got to hold firm and then we'll end up staying." I suggest that Mr. Blair believes that the EU should refuse to offer Theresa May any further concessions on her deal, which would result in it being voted down and pave the way for Parliament to insist on a customs union or a second referendum. In other words, Mr. Blair is happy with Britain becoming a vassal state. Like, this isn't even the remaining position, because the remaining position is that people should still have a say in the European Union, no matter how little and insignificant that is. But with Mr. Blair, he would still like for nothing to change, but for British people to just not be in the EU Parliament, to not have a say in EU politics at all, and still be considered as a vassal state. So you need to understand, like, Tony Blair, this politician, isn't just a Remainer. He wants, like, if he can't get the remaining position, if he can't get the second referendum, he would rather just have Britain enslaved to the European Union rather than have them leave. I can't emphasize on why that is. I don't understand this type of thinking. I think it might have to do with ideology. Like, there is this new trend of globalism that, you know, you need just one world government and no borders, no nations, no deportations. Maybe this is like the mentality that Mr. Blair has, and he really doesn't care about Britain. He just views that the European Union might be a good candidate to just constantly annex more and more territory. I don't know. It's just a speculation. It's just very bizarre for me to see this position from a leader of Britain that used to be an MP. Now, with that said, what do I think is going to happen? I think it's obvious. The European Union has not treated Britain unfairly. The European Union was viewed as an alliance of nations, but it's kind of difficult to view it as an alliance now. The way they've treated Britain is to set an example for any other member states that would want to leave. The fact that they have threatened Hungary to remove them from leadership because they don't like the Hungarian people elect right-wing governments, I guess, is another red sign for me. And, you know, I do think that they are definitely going to try to delay this as much as possible. Hopefully, Labour, for them, they hope that Labour might win. And once Labour wins, they're going to either have a second referendum or not leave at all. So this is definitely the intention of the European Union, to delay this as much as possible. So I hope now people understand what's going on. Even though the European Union acts a little bit offended about Britain keep delaying the negotiations, this is really what they want. Like, this is their plan all along. And anyone else watching it, you gotta understand, the British people wanted to leave, but their politicians want them to stay. And it seems that the politician might have the final say in the situation. I hope you enjoyed my video. If you did, consider subscribing. Also consider spreading this video on your social media. You guys are really helping me a lot when you do this, because it's a way for me to reach out new people. I also appreciate if you could throw a super chat of $1 or so. That's a nice tip that I can get. I also have a Patreon and a PayPal. A little bit of financial incentive makes me e-beg a little bit more. And yeah, that's it. That's the end of the video.
The decision, it will be a decision for Parliament as to whether they accept the deal that I and the government have negotiated on behalf of the United Kingdom, on behalf of the United